Good morning, everybody. It's Chris Frew with BioBuzz for another episode of What's the Buzz, where we interview. This is one of my favorite things to do, Angela. We get to interview ecosystem builders and investors and people that are really building the biotech industry and moving innovation forward. I'm excited today to have you on board. My guest today is Angela Specht, Global Head of BARDA Alliance for Johnson Johnson Innovation, overseeing the Blue Knight program. Angela, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here. Excited to talk about Blue Knight and the ecosystem.
So am I. You're down in DC, right?
I'm in DC a few times a month. Home is Philadelphia, but very much East Coast based.
I wish I would have known that. We could have done this in person. I'm at Cyto up in Philadelphia right now. Here, right at 30th Street Station. Cyto is an amazing spot. They've given me their podcast studio today for our conversation, and we're having an event tonight here around advanced therapy. So if you do want to bridge out, I'm happy to give a ticket to you.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm through 30th Street Station all the time on the way to DC, on the way to New York.
I love it. Well, again, it's easy to connect these ecosystems with a short Amtrak ride. So.
Yeah.
And we're not too far away. Before we jump in real quick, so again, these interviews we do are fantastic, but I couldn't do them without all of our sponsors. These are sponsored by CRB, and I always say that CRB is literally building the ecosystem. You know, you're an ecosystem builder, Angela. I'm an ecosystem, but they're building it. So they're a design engineering firm. When you go around the regions here in Philadelphia, DC. They're literally system. So we're glad to have them as a partner, and I know so many other companies that are out there that they partner with to, again, literally build the labs and the facilities that we work in. So thank you to CRB for sponsoring and helping to sponsor these great programs.
Awesome.
Without further ado, Angela, tell us a lit's bit about, let's just start really high level. What is the alliance between J&J and BARDA, and just tell us about it. And is Blue Knight the alliance? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. So Blue Knight is the alliance between Johnson Johnson, JLABS, and BARDA. What we look to do is we try to find startups that are working in areas of joint interest for Johnson Johnson and BARDA, and then we want to support those startups through their next critical inflection point. And when we look for those biotechs that would be in areas of joint interest, we're really looking at very early stage science. So what BARDA realized is if you kind of wait until the later stages of development, it takes a really big investment to get a drug development program over the finish line so that you would have something ready to go in the case of, a pandemic. We learned that the hard way, right? Or any other threat to the U.S. population. It could be biologic, it could be chemical, it could be nuclear. And what they've realized is, if we start really early and we seed and support these companies, a lot of times there's a commercial business case that we can make for the companies in areas of interest for commercial businesses like Johnson Johnson. And then we can help them develop those same assets to be relevant in the case of a threat to the population. And it's much lower intensity resource investment that way, right? Because these now become sustainable businesses. And also, when that threat happens, that product is ready on the market, go to the pharmacy and get it, right? We don't have to build all of this infrastructure around getting it out. And I think it was a really great kind of aha moment that BARDA had during, back, and actually this was pre-pandemic. We've been around for almost 5 years now to really start to build out this early stage ecosystem. And at Johnson Johnson, obviously, we're committed to the early stage development of assets as well. And we want to see a healthy and thriving ecosystem so that we can then, onboard or support those companies through full development. And so it's been a really nice symbiotic public-private partnership that we've been able to build with Blue Knight. So I don't know what else you want to know about it.
Yeah, so for just to really help our audience understand, so BARDA, it's a government institution. Could you talk a little bit about BARDA and a little bit what they focus on?
Yeah, so BARDA really focuses on the advanced research and development of, like I said, products that would be relevant in the case of threats to the U.S. population. So they're very highly focused on nuclear threats, biologic threats, chemical threats, as well as pandemic threats. And BARDA itself is part of, the Health and Human Services Division, a division called ASPR. There's a lot of acronyms going around within the U.S. government, but I think what's so special about where BARDA sits where our part of BARDA sits, is it sits in an office called BARDA Drive, and they're all about innovation in advanced research and development. And so we're one of the many programs that they have across the U.S. We're the only incubator program, so we have incubator space, and I can tell you a little bit about what Blue Knight offers, but there's other accelerator programs that they offer as well. So it could be for diagnostics, you could be looking at CARB-X for antimicrobial resistance. We have tools and technologies, maybe if you're a med tech company. So BARDA really has a broad offering to advanced innovation within the ecosystem. What's special about Blue Knight is that we offer three kind of, I'd say, benefits to Blue Knight members. So I bucket them in three things, but there's a lot in those three buckets. The first is we give you resources, which is what all startups need, right? So I'll start there. We give you resources in the form of access to JLABS space. So BARDA does give us funding so that we can give lab space and office space to these companies that BARDA pays for. And we also provide non-dilutive funding opportunities for our Blue Knight companies. And so over the 4 or so years that the program has been up and running, BARDA has provided about $12 million in non-dilutive funding to the 52 companies who have come through the program. And we're just getting ready to give out another couple million this year to our Blue Knight companies. That Quickfire Challenge is about to close in March. So we're really proud of the resources that we can offer. Those resources in JLABS they go beyond just the lab space and the office space. You get access to specialty equipment. I mean, millions of dollars of equipment. I know that's really helpful for startups. You can't make that type of investment yourself, right? So you get access to that shared equipment. The second bucket is really around mentorship. And Blue Knight is special in that you not only get mentorship from Johnson Johnson, which you also get as a JLABS community member, but you get mentorship from BARDA. And when you think about the resources and the knowledge that the U.S. government has, if you're thinking about what is my regulatory plan? How am I going to get approval for my really innovative product that doesn't have any precedent in FDA pathways? You have people who have seen almost anything that you can think of. And so we match you with the right mentor to help you get through those regulatory hurdles. And then the last piece is community, which is, I find that to be a very important piece for startups. And when we think about community, we think about not only your Blue Knight community, so the upwards of 50 companies that we've had come through the program, also the JLABS broader community, the almost 1,000 companies that we've had come through JLABS in the decade that we've been here. And then we also open you up to the ecosystems in the cities in which we work as JLABS. And so those ecosystems include investors and funders. They include, other founders. They include people with subject matter expertise. And so when you bring all of that together, I think it's a really powerful package for startups to get access to within the Blue Knight community.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, BioBuzz community is at the heart of what we do. And it's so valuable. We hear it all the time, how important it is to have peers and people that have gone through it. And, again, I'm sure for a new Blue Knight, member company coming in, having other companies they can look to and reach out to and have gone through it. And there's, commercializing in this industry is very challenging, right? So the more you can kind of support and, help people avoid these pitfalls, the more likely you're going to find success. So that community piece is critical. You said 52 companies, and you said so a couple things I want to understand just how the program works. So do you apply to be a member of Blue Knight, and then you can apply for funding in addition to that, or like, what's the mechanism? How does it work? And how does somebody become a Blue Knight resident or a Blue Knight member?
Absolutely. Great question, Chris. So to be a member of Blue Knight, you apply, it's a joint application to apply to JLABS. And Blue Knight is sort of a checkbox that you put that, yes, I'm interested in Blue Knight. And then another part of the application will open up for you where you talk about your relevance to those areas of interest for the US government. And so the same way we have this joint mentorship between J&J and BARDA for the companies, the application process is also joint. So we will have a review from SMEs within J&J to say, are you a good fit for JLABS? Can we give you the type of support that you need to make you more successful within Johnson & Johnson? And BARDA will do the same thing. BARDA will say, do I have SMEs who are going to be able to help accelerate this company? Because really what we want are companies who are going to benefit the most from this suite of tools that we give them to accelerate. So it's an online application process. You put that application on through the J&J Innovation website. And if you check that BARDA checkbox, it comes directly to my desk. I'll see it same day that you've applied for the BARDA program. And it does take a couple of weeks to get through all of the reviews. But if it is relevant for BARDA, it will land on their desk in about 2 weeks' time.
Great. So a company is interested, so they have an innovative new technology that could help with, the next pandemic. All right. So they apply, it goes through the process. And so, Angela, you and your counterpart at BARDA said, we like them, let's bring them in. What happens then? Like, is there, do they become part of it and then they can start using it, or is there?
Balloons fall from the sky first, right? And then so once they're accepted into the program, we onboard them into the JLABS community. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with the JLABS community, we offer physical footprint, which is what I talked about, the office space and the lab space. Some companies might not be in the areas that we have that physical space, but they still want access to community. And so for those, we give them what we call a virtual membership. Again, BARDA is going to supplement their fees for their virtual membership. But the onboarding process for physical location, it's a lease, it's an incubator space. So we'll onboard those companies into the space. And then, from day one, they're able to have access to the site events, all of the equipment, the spaces that they select during their onboarding process.
Okay. So, so after they are onboarded, you mentioned a quick fire challenge, and you also mentioned, one of the resources that they get is kind of non-dilutive funding or access to non-dilutive funding. So, how? I guess 2 questions. So these quick fire funding challenges, they are just for members. Is that correct? Is that how I have it?
Yeah. So these challenges are open only to Blue Knight members. We are running a special challenge this year where Blue Knight companies can partner with a non-Blue Knight company to jointly work on a project together. We think that's a great way to expand the community and the impact, and also to find other companies who might be interested in joining Blue Knight. So we're really excited about that Partner Quickfire Challenge. The funding amounts differ for each challenge. But generally we're talking about 100 to 400,000 of non-dilutive funding that those challenge winners would have access to.
And what's a challenge? So we know what an investment pitch competition is, right? And we know how to apply to grants. But how does a challenge differ, or how do you look at that from your lens?
Yeah. So we think that the Quickfire Challenge setup is really special, especially for early stage companies, because with grant funding, you have an onerous application that you fill out, you wait for a long time for a decision, and you might wait an even longer time to get the money into the bank. And our Quickfire challenges are set up so that within 2 to 3 months of that challenge closing, you're going to have your Quickfire Challenge funds in the bank. Most of our Quickfire challenges don't require ongoing reporting to the government, and they're not milestone based. Now, if there's a large award, we did have a few years ago a very large award from the government where some companies got upwards of $1 million. They did require reporting on those. But generally speaking, these Quickfire challenges, you don't require milestone reporting. And And the other great thing about our quickfire challenges within J&J is that you are going to actually have judges from, our SMEs. So you're going to have many people within the company who are going to get a look at your technology as well, which I know is also valuable for startups. I'll give you an example of some of the topics that we've used. They're broad, because what we want to do is really accelerate companies through their next stage. So the one that we have open right now is accelerating pivotal progress. And what we want our Blue Knight companies to do is to show us what is a really important milestone that they need to meet, that if they just had this funding, they could get there more quickly. So maybe they've been waiting on a tox study that is really going to advance their IND package, and they just haven't had the funding to do it. And so that's a great application for, accelerating pivotal progress. What we try to do with the companies is really have it be very specific of what you're going to do and how it's going to impact and accelerate your program to patients.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of like once you get in the club, then you get all these like hackathons, and it's almost like it to me, it just creates this sense of like, hey, now you're a Blue Knight member, and you're just repeatedly giving them as a startup, right? And most people that are starting a company are probably competitive. I would assume that one of your traits. You're kind of giving them opportunities to kind of like keep pushing the next phase of the innovation through these challenges. So I love even just like the overall visualization of that as a group coming together.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And, while they're competitive, I will say the startup community in biotech is also one of the most giving communities that I've, had the pleasure of being engaged with. Just even in informal networking, you hear them giving advice to each other, sharing contacts, you're looking at doing that type of study. I know somebody who has a model that's really great for that. And so I think it's amazing to see them work together.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think that goes back to that third pillar that you talk about is community. And I always just say these startups aren't creating a Candy Crush app, right? Like a little bit different than, than occupying your time on a train ride or something like that. These are companies that are creating innovations that are impacting health, safety, and human health, and your family members. And so when the community comes together, I agree with you. This startup community, everybody comes in with this mindset of like, hey, how do we help? Because helping one person helps us all. And I think of all the startup communities I've been in, the biotech community truly has that type of collaborative winning mentality.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. All boats rise.
All boats rise, indeed. What so you mentioned you look for early stage companies. Is there anything else that you look for in companies that you can talk about? Maybe like if someone's listening today, like you can give them kind of the rubric on like, here's the things that we see we really look for that works for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with sort of like the generic, what you might get back in the email if you're not accepted into the program, right? We're looking for companies that you must be incorporated. We love ideas and we love academics, but we want that IP in a company that we can work with. And we want you to be advanced to the point of, if you're a medical device, we'd like you to have a prototype. If you are, developing a drug, we'd like to see some data on that, right? We'd like to see some animal data, at least on that. If you have a platform, it would be great to know that you have used that platform to generate output from that platform. And so a lot of people come with platform technologies, and, it's not a platform until it's done what it's supposed to do at least twice, because you've shown that you can replicate that. And so those are just some of like the table stakes that we share with folks. But really I'd say the needle we're trying to thread is, how do you be in an area of focus for BARDA and a commercial opportunity that J&J could be interested in mentoring you with? And so people, even inside the company, people are like, how do you do that? How do you find those? And let me tell you, there are so many out there. And I was surprised. I was a skeptic when I stepped into this role that we'd be able to find them. But what we're finding more and more is that we're not living in a world of like one bug, one drug anymore. We're living in a world of platforms and pathways. And so you might find that you have an asset that is really active in a pathway that could be relevant for neuroscience. Well, if it's crossing the blood-brain barrier and it's helping regenerate tissue in the brain, it could also be helpful in the case of like a neurotoxin, right? And so you find that these pathway assets really could be relevant across multiple indications. And so to give you an example of that, we have a company called Neuroene, and they're working on an asset that, it's a small molecule, it's a pill. It crosses the blood-brain barrier really well, active in CF. It just also happens to, help with tissue regeneration and could help us in the case of neurotoxin outbreak. And how powerful would it be to have a pill that's shelf stable at the pharmacy in case we had that type of emergency in New York City? And so that's one example of where we're doing that with an asset that goes across multiple indications. We also see platforms that would be relevant across, could be utilized to make a vaccine more effective and could also be used in drug development to make a drug more effective. So giving, just an example of some platform technologies, if we have a minute, we have a great company called Amplitude Therapeutics, and they're working on what they call trans-amplifying RNA, and it's going to help make drugs more effective across multiple therapeutic areas. And so we're really excited about that asset use for, BARDA's areas of interest as well as commercial areas of interest. And so if you're out there and you're saying, I'm working in oncology, I don't think that this could work for me. Think about some of the literature that might say, but the pathway I'm working in is a pathway that could be relevant somewhere else.
That's really interesting. I think, we hear sometimes from startups that, investors want like very laser focus.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is like, yes, we want laser focus, but we also want you to tell us that, if we succeed, here's the other areas that, that it impacts. So that's kind of an interesting, kind of twist on it.
Yeah, exactly. Because the reality is, if you've got an oncology asset, your investors are going to want you to be laser focused there. And that makes total sense. But what if we're missing the opportunity to just get a little bit of data to be able to use that asset just in case we need it? Mm-hmm. Why not make that investment now? Let the government help, let J&J help to make that investment now so that it's ready to go when we need it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you wouldn't be a startup if you didn't have to pivot at some point either, right? Mm-hmm. So like, that you kind of set up the table for the future stakes for that. What about what about some other trends that you're seeing? When you play in the world that you're in with, mm-hmm. with the government and then mm-hmm. innovation, I'm sure you got a lot of trends that you're kind of, seeing that, is on your radar. I'd love to, if you could kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I'm in a unique position where I'm working in JLABS right now. So I'm working in the incubation space. And I'm also working in a government program. So I'm working in the space where companies are, really dependent on grants. I've had the opportunity before this role to work in our JJDC, which is our corporate investment arm. So I've seen that side of it as well. And within Johnson & Johnson, what we say is we're there with the innovator for the journey. We want to meet them where they are in that continuum. And so it could be very late stage where we're thinking about business development, and we have folks that can help with that. It could be where, you're kind of in that early development phase where maybe you're thinking about licensing and partnering, and we have our innovation centers who are great at doing that. And then we have these early stage companies, our JLABS companies, where we offer incubation through JLABS. And so we really realize that this is a journey. And I think what's going to be really impactful right now, and I'm sure companies are already seeing it, is these early stage companies that rely on grants are under a lot of pressure right now and uncertainty. And so what I'm going to be looking at in 2025, sort of my red thread that I'd like to pull through Blue Knight, is how do we help these companies get ready to raise investment aside from the grant funding that they have. So Blue Knight will have a presence at Bio coming up in June. And we will be inviting a lot of investors to that event to meet with our startups to help them refine their pitch, to help them, like you said, like, how do I come across as focused, even if I'm working in oncology and vaccines, right? So those are the types of things that we are really going to be pushing on in 2025, because for companies to be sustainable, they need to be able to get to those inflection points. And the reality right now is that the grant environment might not get them where they need to go, but there's other funding out there, and we're going to help them go after that. And so everybody who's sitting out there who's thinking, my IND package, I was expecting to get $3 million in NIH grant funding. Do I just put that on hold? You really need to be thinking about what are those alternative ways that we can get funding to do that work.
Yeah, there's a lot of startups out there, and you're right, with the landscape today, some of the early grant funding is there's a big question mark. So, and I think it's a lot different. And coming from, a company who's raising, funds ourselves, it is a lot different when you have someone call an investor and say, "Hey, I'd like you to take a look at this company," than it is when you're that startup company and you're one of 1,000 other companies banging down the door. So you didn't talk about, I think that was part of you mentioned that as part of community, but also resources, those two.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of investor community sounds like a really important thing that you're fostering as part of one of your trends this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's going to be important for everybody in the early space to be just thinking about it sooner than maybe we thought about it before. That's definitely one trend I see. We talked a little bit about the scientific trend of moving away from one bug, one drug type approach. I also think there's a ton of trends within the discovery space that I'm really excited about. If folks had a chance to read my blog that came out last week, I was at JPM in January, and I spoke with so many companies who are working on just this convergence of discovery models, these non-animal models, whether it be AI, quantum computing, other sort of like combinations of the two, and also combining that with wet lab capabilities to have that data feed back in. It's just really powerful, and I see us moving to a place where we're going to have a lot more success in the early stage, and we're going to have winners that are coming out of early development that are going to be so good that they're going to win in later stage as well. And I'm super excited to see that come to fruition. I'm excited to see who emerges as the leader, because it's a very, everybody's got an AI drug discovery platform these days, but I truly think there are some in there that are going to be transformational.
Well, I agree, and I think it's such a fascinating time, and we'll make sure we share the blog tied to this so people can find it. But I don't know. I think when it comes to it, I think you're gonna, there's leaders now, but just like every industry that's happened, what you see is you see leaders happen, but then you see that there's going to be needs for very specific use cases. So you're going to see a lot of smaller companies being able to say, hey, if you're in the R&D space in antibiotic resistance, here's our drug discovery platform with our really curated data set and our proven models and vice. So I think that as this kind of plays out over the couple of years, and to your point, what's this going to do? It's going to lower cost, increase success rates. And then you get to the clinical stage and you have like digital twins and all kinds of other stuff happening. There's just so much happening.
Yeah.
It's like to think, I feel like we're at in the stage now where you can really see like the Star Trek moments happening where, in the next couple decades.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say to folks that are working in that space, it's crowded, it's hard to stand out. But if you have some data, if you can show the target that came out of the process that I did, this is some, in vivo data, in vitro data, like what can you show to kind of demonstrate that your platform works? I think is going to be a differentiator than just I have a really cool platform and I and my structures seem cool.
Yeah, all the new AI and everything else doesn't matter. Like, you still need data.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Are there any upcoming things you want to talk about? I know you said that any dates or any upcoming milestones that you want to really make sure you touch on for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. So early March, those of you that'll be at Autumn, we're going to have a few panels there, a couple Blue Night, as well as JLABS broadly will be represented. So if you want to come say hi, I'll be there in person and you can learn a little bit more about Blue Night. I think what I really want to leave folks with is that, public-private partnerships are powerful. That's a lot of P's. But they really are. And when you bring together two really complementary expertise, like what we have between BARDA and Johnson Johnson, you're going to be able to create something that's even more, you're going to get even more acceleration for biotech companies. And that's what we're all looking for, is to get these products to patients more quickly because the patients are waiting. So if you are interested in what we've just talked about, please reach out. Click that little box on your Blue Night application and it'll come into my inbox, and I'd love to hear about your technology.
Well, I think that's great. Thank you so much, Angela. And we've enjoyed the partnership we've had with JLABS for several years. And I love every time I walk in, I see that patience is waiting sign. It does ground you in, like I said, what we're all here for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris.
Well, thanks for the great conversation today. And next time we know that we're both in the same city, we're going to do this one in person.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yes, maybe we can do this again at the end of the year, and we can kind of see how these initiatives around and supporting your investment have gone, and some of these next quickfire challenges. I'd love to get a recap of how the year's gone if you're open to that.
I would love to. And we're going to have hopefully some really exciting things to announce at the end of the year. So I'd love to have an opportunity to come back.
All right, absolutely. We'll make that happen. Well, thank you all for joining in today, and then learning more about Blue Night and all the amazing things that Angela and her team and the team of teams between BARDA and JLABS are all doing. Please join us again in 2 weeks. We have another episode coming up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have about a dozen of these that are posted there. And again, we've talked to some really great people, just like you, Angela, who are really wake up every day trying to build this industry, build companies, build startups. And there's a lot of gold in these interviews that I think. And so, again, I learn something new every time. So I encourage everybody to check out our YouTube channel and some of the other conversations we've had. So, Angela, again, thank you for everything today. Excited to continue the partnership. And I hope you have an enjoyable rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, Chris.